After graduating from the Naval Academy with the class of 1964 and pinning on his Navy pilot wings of gold, Joe Hoser Satrapa flew 162 combat missions during the Vietnam conflict. While flying his F-8 Crusader, Satrapa was famous for the personal arsenal that he brought along in the event that he was shot down. He carried 2 Mark 33 hand grenades, a Colt Python 357 revolver with 60 rounds of ammunition, a Smith & Wesson 9mm with non-NATO hollow point ammunition and 3 spare magazines, a custom Randall survival knife, and an additional throwing knife. Satrapa earned the call sign Hoser after repeatedly missing the air-to-air banner during an aerial gunnery exercise. During his 4th run at the banner, he was increasingly frustrated and he hosed off his remaining bullets and still missed. When they got to the debrief, he was awarded the call sign Hoser. After transitioning to the F-14 community, he was flying a test event, what was supposed to be a 2v2 engagement between 2 F-14 Tomcats and 2 U.S. Air Force F-15 Eagles. One of the Tomcats went down in the chocks with a maintenance issue, so Hoser and his Rio launched solo, but when they started the first engagement, Hoser's Rio pretended to be the wing pilot over the common frequency, which caused both of the Eagle pilots to think they were going against 2 Tomcats instead of 1. The confusion allowed Hoser to ultimately get a guns kill on each of the F-15s, and the resultant HUD footage almost caused the Japanese to buy Tomcats instead of the Eagles they'd already ordered. My first Hoser experience is when I arrived at the F-14 training squadron at NAS Oceana in late 1983 and sat through the orientation brief, also known as the patent speech. So for details on that and other Hoser stories, let's talk to retired Navy commander and fellow Tomcat Rio Jack Jaws Marshall, who went through VF 101 as a newly winged ensign just ahead of me. Tell us what you remember about that legendary welcome aboard brief that he used to give, because he wasn't the CO, but it was so good that he would give the brief.
He was a lieutenant commander. So here's this guy at the end of his career, don't know who he is, smoking up there in the front, and all of a sudden just starts intimidating us all, standing, in front of the American flag and behind this lectern, telling all of us noodle neck Rios and limp-wristed pilots, if they wanted to survive and not get killed and not have their wives marry somebody else in the ready room, they better pay attention. It was just epic. It was like, a 7-minute speech. And then he would just, exit. And it was like, what just happened? Who was this guy? I don't even know. I've been here for like 3 days.
So one of the Hoser stories was related to you by a British and RAF exchange officer. He was I guess Leggy was a Tornado guy, or was he a Phantom guy?
I think he was Phantoms.
And he was flying with Hoser, and he told you an interesting story about that flight with Hoser.
Smoke in the cockpit, air source off. We have to do these boldface. So, right, it was, I think, throttle idle, air source off, something like that, or just air source off, ram air increase. Do you have a cooling air light at the same time? And he's like, I'm just smoking, mate, or whatever. So it's like, okay, we're just wound tight. Remember, we were ensigns back then.
Well, nobody smoked in the airplane by the time we started flying the Tomcat, except a guy like Hoser. Right? Mask is dangling. He's up there, smoking a cigarette. And Leggy's
they
like
had special ashtrays that had the pivot, it was fit in the FOD pocket and it would pivot open, put it in and put it out, hose it back and put it in. And they just didn't care. It's like, it just shut up.
Yeah.
It was nice. It was fun. I mean, but you grew up fast, right?
Well, this sort of set the tone for us as Tomcat guys. And so it was forged very quickly that you are second to no one. You live in nobody's shadow. We're going to kick ass in the airplane, and we're going to kick ass at the O Club. And welcome aboard, gents. This is going to be the time of your life. And Hoser was the standard bearer for that kind of, and it wasn't what he said so much as just the way he lived his life with this, I don't give a shit. And if you don't like it, that's on you. So that worked until it didn't work. And then it worked again for him. So let's talk about the layman piece and how he was brought back into the Navy after leaving it as a lieutenant commander.
People may not know, but if you don't select for 05 commander, then you have to get out at 20 years in the Navy. That's just the way it is. It's law. I think you can actually go to 20 years and 3 months. But Hoser had so much personality, and I think at the time, some of the leadership in naval aviation knew that they needed people like Hoser to instill sort of that camaraderie that we're going to win at all costs. It's 100%. You know, we're in as fighter guys. We lost a little bit when we lost Hoser. So he was brought back in with John Lehman, who was Secretary of the Navy, and he brought him back in on a presidential appointment to commander, which then allowed him to serve another 7 or 8 years as a commander. And he went back to have, you know, some great tours at VF 101. And I think he went to Strike U and served a little bit of time at Top Gun after that too. So just fantastic. So that's how he was brought back in, and they brought him back into VF 101. And so when I came back to be an instructor, then I'm back there with Hoser again as an instructor and being able to see it from his, you know, from a different viewpoint, from the instructor viewpoint, and got to watch some more of the patent speeches. The guy, right, you know, the instructor in the back of the ready room that got to say hello. So it was really fun.
You mentioned he was at 101, but he also, as you said, was at Strike U. Now, while he was at Strike U, he had an accident. So let's talk about that a little bit.
I mean, the guy was into firearms. All right. So bought my first gun from him because he was selling guns out of the ready room. At the same time, he had a van and he had a sidewinder on the side of his van pointed forward. Okay.
I forgot all about that.
And I was just like, so of course he knows all the ordies, right? And he ends up with the 20 millimeter Gatling gun, which I forget how many barrels are on it, 10, 8, formed it into a big rifle. You know, a lot of us will go out and have cocktails or play golf on the weekend. I think Hoser really enjoyed going out and blowing things up. And so he had this long 20 millimeter, which he fabricated somehow. I never saw it, but somehow it had a malfunction and it blew his thumb off. So he talked in an orthopedic surgeon into cutting off this big toe and fastening it to where his thumb was, because he needed it. It was his right hand. So you need the opposing digit of the human hand in order to fly airplanes, because you have to be able to select trim and other things that are on the control stick of an airplane. There's lots of little buttons and switches for a pilot on the control stick. So he went from Hoser to Tozer, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. I'm doing air wing workups, right? So I'm out in Fallon, I run into him, we're talking. And of course, what's one of the things he does? He immediately puts his hand in my face and says, "Some people say it smells like my feet." And I'm like, "Hoser, you haven't changed. It's just great to see you." So that is Hoser. Who else would get their toe cut off to put on their hand? A lot of people would just sulk for the rest of their life.
Yeah. No, you can't make this shit up, right? And that's the same place. That's the last time I saw him too, was at Fallon during air wing workups. And same deal. He's like, you know, check this out. You know, it looked like a big toe stuck on his hand.
Toe.
Right. But he did have an opposing grip, and he was not med down for life. It worked. It kept him in the airplane. The legend is true in his case.
I mean, he's the one that taught me, Ward, how to put my keys and an extra set of keys and an extra cover on my desk and leave them there, so that no matter what you did, if you were screwing around at the Oak Club or you're off base at Lynn Haven Mall buying some stereo, somebody thought you were there because your keys and your cover were on your desk. I learned that from Hoser, and I used it my entire career. I used it as an 05. I would do that. I would check in my desk drawer. I kept some keys and a hat and maybe a spare wallet. Just have it on there in my desk. Of course he's here.
Hoser got out of the Navy, and then he worked for the fire service. He was flying these firefighting airplanes.
So he put in probably another almost 20 years fighting fires for the state of California, and probably a public-private partnership flying these S2s that were converted or retrofitted with high-performance engines and bladders and everything else to go fight fires. And he did that for, another 18 years and just flew every day. He was on TV after getting doused. He was trailing another aircraft that had put out that, that orange liquid fire suppressant. And he actually made it onto the local news, which was just beautiful.
Now, I was dropping on that drop, coverage level 6. That's almost a maximum load.
Just as he made a drop on the raging Yuba fire, Joe Satrapa's S-2 bomber was hit by a wave of fire retardant from the plane in front, lifted by a blast of heat.
I'm climbing out, and then I realized when I looked out, straight ahead that I couldn't see anything because it was totally covered with retardant.
Almost completely blind, he immediately went to instrument
level.
flying.
10 degrees nose up, wings level, check the vertical speed to make sure I'm climbing.
He called on his wingman to help guide him, then put water from this bottle on his flying glove.
Now my helmet's still plugged into the back so I can talk to my wingman and I reach over the top against the wind and do the window. Yeah, a little hole that big.
His inspiration, the same as when he'd come under fire in combat over North Vietnam. What would John Wayne do?
My buddy said, and a voice came from heaven. It was John himself, and he told me 10 degrees nose up, wings, VSI, altimeter.
Landing was a little challenging.
The 4-inch circle right here, and then as I was coming back, I couldn't sit back here like this. I had to get up here like this.
He says it was as exhilarating as being in combat.
This is the next best thing to it. There's nobody shooting at you, but it's just as challenging.
So how did he feel about getting back to flying?
In the smoke till I croak.
At the Grass Valley Air Attack Base, Dave Marquis, News 10.
Jaws, thanks for coming aboard and remembering one of our great fighter mentors.
It's absolutely imperative that we had those war fighters to teach us how to rise above and actually do the things that need to be done when it's 24 hours a day, months at a time. You need the hosers.
Commander Joe Hoser Satrapa passed away on March 17th, 2019. He was 78 years old. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. If you're a first-time viewer, please ring the bell and become a subscriber so you don't miss anything. Give me the likes and comment. Check the links below for merch, including Where to Get the Punks trilogy, my first 3 novels about an F-14 squadron. Now available as a Kindle, so check out Amazon.com for details on that. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below, or become a patron at patreon.com/WardCarroll. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again soon.